And so I'm going to share my screen with you all, and we're going to go over a couple ground rules real quick. So I have this permission slip here, and so I'll read the permission slip to you all. I hereby give myself permission to be imperfect in regards to human diversity and issues of oppression. It is okay if I do not know all the answers, or if at times my ignorance and misunderstandings become obvious. I have permission to ask questions that may appear simple or self-explanatory. I have permission to struggle with these issues and be upfront and honest about my feelings. I have the right to share my experiences. I will listen to the opinions of others, even if they are different from mine. Whoops. Hold on. And I do take responsibility for what I can do, including trying to listen as much as I can, striving to gain true and accurate information, speaking from my own experience, and using I statements, working to enhance the celebration of and honor human differences. Okay, those are the ground rules for this conversation. I'm asking everybody to be very, very respectful of everybody's opinions and thoughts. There's no right or wrong answers today. This is going to be a healthy, safe space, healthy conversation for us to have. Just so you all know, I do have the power to remove people from the conversation as well. So again, as you're thinking about sharing your thoughts and your information, please be very, very considerate and be very thoughtful in what you want to say, but also make sure that you are respectful of everybody's opinion and everybody's thoughts on the conversation today. We are all not going to think alike. And I think that's the beauty of it, because that's the diversity in the conversation. Okay? Also, once we start the conversation, what I'm going to ask for everybody to do, you can actually raise your hand if you would like to speak at any point in time. Also, to any one on here who is deaf or hard of hearing, you can send a direct message to Vanessa Arnold, and they will ask the question for you. Again, raise your hand if you would like to be queued in to make a statement, comment, or ask a question or answer a question. And then also to any of our people on here who is deaf or hard of hearing, you can send Vanessa a direct question, and she will get that question out for you. So, why are we here today? I think the names in my background exemplify why we're having this conversation today. But I think the biggest name of why we're having this conversation today is George Floyd, and what has happened to George Floyd the last week and a half. We all know that George Floyd was murdered by police in Minnesota. I'm pretty sure if you haven't seen the video, I would say to you, be very, very careful and conscious of what you see. I mean, I've seen it multiple times. It was a horrific video. And the thing that got me is when they actually played the video and they played the audio loud enough for everybody to hear, and he had actually screamed out for his mother. A lot of people don't know that his mother has been deceased for a couple years now. So for a man to scream out their mother's name, knowing that their mother is deceased, that was a cry for help. We are struggling as a nation right now with everything that's going on. I mean, we can even talk about what's actually going on here in Kentucky with Breonna Taylor, the young lady who was shot and killed while she was sleeping in her bed by police. There's been so many unjust murders that have happened in the last 50, 20, 50, 30 years of police brutality as well as not only police brutality, but also citizens killing innocent African Americans. And that's what we're here to talk about today. What I would like to do is I would like to hear from you all. Chris and I, we do have some information that we want to share, but personally, I want to hear from the people that are on this conference call. I want to hear from you all. I don't want to talk. I think Chris doesn't want to talk either, but we do have information that we want to share with you. But I think it's very, very important to hear from you all and hear how you all are feeling about what's actually taking place in America. We're not going to solve the problems today. But I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from our BCTC community about how everybody is feeling and kind of what, some information that we can use to move forward as an institution. So my first question to everybody is kind of just, can you talk to me? I can tell you how I feel, but how does everyone feel about what's actually going on? So I'm just gonna go first, real quick, and then I'll let anybody else chime in. I had a very, very, very emotional conversation. I have a 30-year-old son and I have a 22-year-old son, and I can remember back in 1992, I was a young teenager at that point in time, and I witnessed the whole Rodney King uh, beating. And I can remember my grandmother having a conversation with me and trying to educate me, because I was trying to understand as a young African American male at that point in time, Grandma, why are they doing that to this man? And she was trying to explain it to me as much as possible, and just, honestly said to me, this is just the way the world is, and you have to learn how to navigate this world. Fast forward to 2020, 6 or 7 days ago, I'm having that same conversation that my grandmother had with me with both of my sons. Uh, and the conversation was a little bit different because, respectfully, I have a little bit more education and I've been doing this work for 15, 16 years. I have a better grasp on race relations in the United States. And so having that conversation with my sons and having a very, very emotional conversation to the point where I was in tears, because we're in 2020 and we're still having the same discussion that I had about 25 years ago with my own grandmother. And so I've been very, very emotional all week. I will be vulnerable and tell you all I have shed a tear or two the last couple of days as well. Because at the end of the day, when I walk out my door, there's no guarantee that I'm coming home. At the end of the day, when I have to think about when my sons go off to work, or if my sons leave the house, there's no guarantee they're coming home. And should I be numb to that? Should that be a norm for me? I don't think that should be a norm for anyone in the world. But that's that's the hand uh, that I have been dealt, as well as my sons have been dealt, and we have to just learn how to play the game. And so, having that conversation with them, talking to them how they need to be uh, um, very attentive if they, get stopped by the police, or very attentive about their surroundings. Um, it's very, very unfortunate that I have to have those conversations with them today. So I've shared my thoughts and how I'm feeling right now, but I want to hear from you. I want to know how you all are feeling right now. How do you feel about what's actually going on today, given the fact that we are going into day 10 about the protest and the rioting? But emotionally, how are you all feeling? So I'm going to open that up now. So anybody, if you feel propelled to speak, please to the Zoom and raise your hand, and then we'll get you in for you to be able to speak your piece. Anybody?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
For me, and just a little bit of background, I come from a small town, Somerset, Kentucky. Um, it's definitely a small Kentucky town. But I had the privilege of growing up with a fair amount of diversity for a small Kentucky town. And through sports and school and other interests, I developed a lot of friendships with Black people. And, I want to stress here at this point to be clear that, the friendships that I'm talking about, they're 20, 25, almost 30 years old, some of them. And these people are not just friends, but people that I consider brothers and sisters. We refer to each other's mothers as our second moms and whatnot. Literally family to me. And I talk to my friends, to my brothers and sisters every day, and I've been emotional, as well, because I hear the pain in their voice. We sometimes laugh about things and joke about them and talk about how we can make them better. But this situation right now is dire, and I've been on the phone every day this week with somebody who's emotional or hurt or afraid. And we all have family here, and when you hear that from your brother, your sister, your mom, whatever, it hurts you deeply. And that's just the cloud that I've been in all week. Um, it's terrible. It's a terrible feeling. And, I just want to make some of those things clear because, later, hopefully, I might talk about some things from an academic perspective or a political science perspective or whatnot. But my stake in this is the most important part of that is the personal relationships I have, and I would even extend that to people with whom I work with, that I see every day. That I love you guys, my family, the people that I work with, and I'm just hurting right now.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for those words, man. And there may be others out there that feel the same way that you feel, given the fact that they have relationships with, you know, black, white, blue, green, purple, doesn't matter. Relationships, with LGBTQA community. It really doesn't matter. Friendship is friendship, relationships are relationships. And so you have the right to feel the way that you feel at this point in time. And you have the right to be empathetic towards marginalized people right now, specifically African American community, given the fact that what we've had to endure, um, you know, over the last, 30, 50, well, I say 400 years, we was brought over here in 1619. So, all right. So we have someone ready to share. Would you let them in, Dr. Jones?
Yes. Good afternoon.
Hey, Dr. Jones.
I just want to take a minute to speak to my white Caucasian friends. Thank you, Dr. McZee, for this time that we have together today. This came to me not so long ago. I have always been a proponent of all lives matter. And while that sounds like it's a very caring position, I want to describe what has changed within me. I had one of my grandsons asked me the other day, "Nana, do you love me?" And I said, I love all my grandchildren. And he looked hurt. And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "But do you love me?" And listening to the news and watching this violence has taken a toll on all of us. But you know, I understood from that very moment the difference between Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. I do believe that all lives matter, but you know what? If you're not able to speak out and say specifically, Black Lives Matter, we are marginalizing our African American community. So I just want you to think about that next time when you're speaking to someone that's African American. Make sure that you address that person and not address everybody. Um, I know that's probably not much, but that's basically what I've learned this week.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Chris,
Yep.
you can hear me?
Yeah.
Dr. Jones, can you hear me? I think we lost her. Chris, you can hear me though, right?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. For some reason, you lost me. But anyway, that's all that I had to say is that we do not need to continue to marginalize. We just need to speak out for one another, and speak out in favor of one another, and let people know that their lives do matter, and that Black lives do matter, and that is what this fight is against. Thank you.
Wow, powerful words, Dr. Jones. Thank you. Thank you so much. We have Roger Pearson next. Roger. Chris, can you still hear me? Oh, there you go. Roger?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You're on.
All right. I'm trying to start my video too, but it's not coming on. I'm blocked. Can I wait a minute? I just choked on something else.
Yeah. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. Yeah, we'll come back to you.
All right. Thanks.
Can we, Stephen Barry, can we bring Stephen Barry on, please?
Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm bombing your call here, but I have a different perspective, a similar perspective to most white people, and I'm white, and I've grown up in the South in Georgia with all the privileges that allows me in the South in Georgia. And I didn't have a whole lot of African-American friends growing up. I still don't have a lot of African-American acquaintances. So the only way I can approach this issue is from reading, looking at research, talking to people, attending sessions like this on DEI. And I'm not unique as far as my experience. I mean, there's just not been a lot of interaction, but just reading the history and, coming up with kind of a summary of what's going on now is that, like Dr. McZee said, this is a 400-year problem. I mean, this society has grown up with an economic, political, and social system that for 400 years has ignored the African American communities. And so now what we have is this big donut with a big hole in the middle that we've got to fill in somehow. And unfortunately, people are dying because of bad police practices, and unfortunately, the ones that are most tragically killed are African Americans. So I hope this moment brings to light that we need to start looking at everything in our society and how to retool all of our political, economic, and social systems to include all the voices that are out there. But that's the comments that I had.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you for those words. It's interesting you say that, because I know that I want to go back to Roger Pearson, but it's interesting you say that, and you talked about essentially what I heard you say, you talked about your privilege and your privilege that you've had growing up in Georgia and not having as much accessibility to African Americans as you probably want to. But I know Dr. Leffert is going to speak a little bit about, honestly, white privilege. And so I want to make sure, but I want to hold on that, Dr. Leffert, because I want to hear from some more people. So I'm gonna go back to Roger Pearson, and then I'm gonna go to someone else after that. So, Roger, are you available now?
Yes, I'm available.
Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Can I share my video?
Sure.
There we go. Okay.
I can see you.
Well, there's a part of me that's outraged by this, and there's a part of me that's really scared. One thing as a former worker in a mental health treatment hospital, I know that there are nonviolent ways of handling violent situations where, the safety of the person that you're restraining is the utmost consideration. And I think our police should be learning those. I think we need to demilitarize our police force. It's a really highly militarized, macho culture in the police, and I think that needs to change. But my biggest fear right now is just all the divisiveness and the violence involved, and I think some of the violence takes the attention away from the important, social changes that, we need to make and the discussion that needs to happen. And it makes it easy for people to discount, some of the protesters and the points they're trying to make. So, I don't know what's gonna help with those situations. I think this dialogue is a great idea. I think the more dialogues we can have, the more we can talk about this issues in every aspect of American life, the more people are going to come to understand each other and hopefully find some solutions. That's all I hope. So thanks. That's all I've got to say right now.
Thank you, Roger. We appreciate your words and your empathy as well. I want to go to the next person. And again, I want this conversation to manifest organically, okay? I don't want this to be a forced conversation for us to have. So, Daikia, are you there?
Yeah, yes.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
I don't have anything very pointed to say. I just want to say that, I am a mother of Black sons. I have a 19-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I've been debating and going back and forth about how to have these conversations because they're both old enough to be on social media and see what is happening and how it's happening. And my 12-year-old is very inquisitive and he's very sensitive to why his life doesn't matter the same way his white friend's life matters, in his words. And so it has been difficult trying to navigate this process and figure out the right words to say to him. But one of the things that happened was that both of my sons participated in the protests that were going on in Lexington. And they both did research about how to appropriately conduct themselves and how to be a part of something in a peaceful way that is hopefully will be effective. And so I guess all in all, I just want to say that, it is something that has been happening for far too long. And I do feel like we've lost way too many people, males and females, to violence from people who are supposed to protect and serve, and not and there have not been appropriate consequences for those actions. But the thing that I'm holding on to and that is helping me make it through each day is when I look in the face of my sons, I continue to see hope, because I know who I am raising them to be and the value that is within them and the giftedness that is there. And I'm choosing to focus my efforts there. And so it's not to be numb to it, but it is just to keep my perspective in a positive way and try to continue to teach them how they can advocate for themselves. And, you know, I know this is a work call and this might not be allowed, but since it's my personal opinion, I'm going to say that I do a whole lot of praying. And I do a whole lot of believing for protection for my children, because it is scary, like you said, Mr. McZee, to think about the fact that when you leave, there's no guarantee that you're coming home. And we could generalize that and say, well, there's no guarantee that anybody's going to come home, because you never know what's going to happen. But when I see comic strips of a little black boy at the doctor's office saying to the doctor, he's got a target on his chest, and he's saying to the doctor, can you please remove this birthmark that troubles me? That our young men and young women of color are born with a target on their backs, and there's nothing we could do about that. So I feel everybody's pain. I feel pain. I feel anger. I feel hurt. I feel confused. I feel sad. But in the midst of it, I continue to choose to have hope. And I don't know how far hope is going to get me, but it's what's sustaining me right now. So thank you for this opportunity to speak.
And wow, I don't know how I'm gonna follow that, to be honest with you. Thank you, Daikia. Very strong and encouraging words, but it's reality. It is reality. And for those who do have, you know, African-American sons, and it goes both ways, African-American sons or females, or African-American non-binary children, it's a question now when, you know, when they leave the home. It's a real actual question now. It's a real actual concern now. And it's gotten to the point where, and I can just use myself as an example, where, you know, I typically don't even ask my sons where they're going. Where are you going? And it's interesting because now I ask them where they're going. And they looking at me like, dude, why are you asking me where am I going? But it's because I am concerned, and I at least want to know where you're at, you know, in case, just in case. I just want to know where you're at. And that's becoming common now. Even you know, even for my son that stays in Arizona, you know, the last probably 7 days, you know, I've called him 3, 4, 5 times a day. He's like, Dad, is something wrong? And I'm like, are you living under a rock? Do you understand what's going on in society right now? And he does, but at the same time, he's only 22. So he's like, it's almost like that. Nothing is going to happen to me mentality. And I'm like, dude, you are not an exception to the rule, you know? So, but again, thank you, Daikia, for that. So Dr. Lefford, you know, I want to segue a little bit into, I think Stephen had hit on privilege that he knows that he has living here in society. So I really wanted to allow you to talk a little bit about, you know, privilege and what privilege is, what white privilege is, and just kind of give us your expertise on the work that you've done over the years, you know, and you know, maybe just kind of give us a definition of what that is. And because some people don't recognize it, because some people don't know that it's a privilege that they already have, so they've never had to even learn the term white privilege, right? Because they've always lived in a world where they've been the privileged person. So I'll turn it over to you and let you, you know, speak to us about, you know, white privilege, what white privilege is, and, you know, and kind of educate us a little bit on that.
Sure. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
So you hit a couple of things that I definitely want to talk about. I want to talk about white privilege today. And you know, something that I want to be sure that I do in my discussion is not just to define it, to talk about what it is or what it isn't, but I want to focus specifically on some practical steps that we can all take to confront it and to combat injustice. So why is this so important to discuss? To me, you know, over the past few weeks, we've seen so many people speaking out about the recent disgusting murder of George Floyd. We've seen so many feel-good type of posts on Facebook and Instagram, referencing statistics and Bible verses, and the list go on. We've seen the memes, the shares, the catchphrases, the videos. And I think a lot of white people have really good intentions with these types of displays, and for that I'm proud. However, to be as clear as possible, we're still missing the mark. Our posts, our shares, our hashtags are still not acknowledging the privilege that we as white people benefit from, and that causes other people of color to suffer. We're not acknowledging the broad range of that suffering. This isn't just about police brutality. As somebody else and you both mentioned earlier, this is a centuries old, multifaceted problem. And if we're going to make a serious effort to unite against injustice, we have to take an introspective, an inward looking, proactive, and practical approach. We have to identify, admit, and confront our white privilege, because that is what perpetuates racial injustice. So, what is white privilege? White privilege refers to systemic and institutional biases that advantage white people, that's the name, but more importantly, that disadvantage people of color. These are social, political, and economic mechanisms that make it much easier for someone like me, who looks like me, to navigate everyday transactions compared to people of color. Okay, so where does this come from? Taran, again, you hit on some of these things earlier. You know, to understand white privilege, we have to acknowledge, and this is tough for white people, but we have to acknowledge the centuries, 1619, I think you mentioned, that people of color that have been arbitrarily crammed into these lesser biological, social, political, and economic strata to justify subhuman treatment. Colonialism, the Three-Fifths Compromise, slavery, Civil War, secession, KKK and police violence, Jim Crow laws, all of these things were sold with misinformation and ignorance, claiming that people of color are fundamentally and biologically lesser than white people, and that they should be treated accordingly. Thankfully, enough change finally happened during the civil rights era that these overt or explicit acts of racism became a bad thing. But let's be clear, the worldviews underpinning those overt actions, they haven't gone away. They still live on in less obvious, silent, and subtle ways through white privilege, those systemic biases that pervade and pervert every aspect of our society. Two things I want to mention make white privilege difficult to realize and difficult to admit, even for tolerant white people. The first thing is white privilege's close association with explicit racism. And the second is the notion that the word privilege somehow diminishes a white person's accomplishments. Okay, so first, white people in the United States, white people in general really, but we're focused on the United States. White people are privileged because of their biological skin color and the systemic biases that generations of racist people have put in place. And we struggle to admit our privilege because of that association with racism. Like I said a while ago, finally in the 60s, racism became a bad word. It's a bad thing. But let me be clear, admitting our privilege does not mean that we're racist. I benefit every single day from being white, but I'm not racist. The second thing that many white people struggle with, they're uncomfortable with the term privilege. However, white privilege does not assume that white people have things that they did not earn. Many white people who are successful, they worked hard to get there, myself included. But we would be naive to not admit and acknowledge that we have an easier path through life because of our genetically assigned skin color. That advantage, our white privilege, although it's consciously perpetuated by some white people, we all unconsciously enjoy it. And that's what we have to confront and fight and change. If you're on board with me so far, I have some questions for you, white friends. I want you to think about the following things and how I might experience them, or you as a white person might experience these things relative to a person of color. Why do we enjoy the convenience of buying our shampoo in a 20-yard long hair care aisle while people of color have to navigate to find their own little section called ethnic hair products? Why does the entire grocery store reflect white culture with the exception of the 2 or 3 aisles that are reserved for very limited stocks of ethnic foods? Why are we more likely to be trusted insofar as our financial responsibility? Why are we over 100% less likely to have a high-cost mortgage? Why are we more likely to be treated as individuals and humanized, that is, to be given the benefit of the doubt? Why are we less likely to see someone run to the other sidewalk when they approach us at dusk? Why are we less likely to be pulled over or presumed guilty, to receive a maximum sentence or the death penalty for an equal crime? Why are we 2 times less likely by conservative estimate to be killed by police? Why are we making 5 to 10 times more money than black counterparts with equal credentials? Why are white people who march on the Capitol carrying AR-15s because they can't get a haircut labeled as patriotic, while people of color who take a knee or carry a cardboard sign are labeled as unpatriotic and un-American? Indeed, what a privilege we have. Although, many of us are not guilty in consciously perpetuating white privilege, if we continue to prosper in these ways and let these things happen, we're equally complicit. So what can we do? I want to wrap up here. These are the practical steps that I mentioned at the onset. And before I say this stuff, please understand that I'm taking these things myself. I'm not merely lecturing. We all have to do better, and that includes me. First thing we have to do is recognize and admit our own privilege. I check every box that makes me an in the majority person of privilege. I'm a white male. I cannot understand or appreciate the plight of my fellow citizens, nor can any of us, until we admit our own privileged status. Once we do that, we can take a second step. We have to investigate, confront, and challenge our own biases and privileges. We all have them. It's part of how we're wired. What biases do we have? Why do we have them? How do they harm others? What privileges do we enjoy because of our skin pigment that others don't? And go back to the list of questions that I just asked. I'm sure we could all add a lot of material to that list, but only by understanding how and if we're contributing to the problem solution. And I do want to say, since this is a conference call with Bluegrass employees, I want to give a shout out to a resource that we have at the college in the Cultural Competency Certification Program and its section on civility that can help us investigate, confront, and challenge these issues and do so in a safe and respectful environment. I recently went through that program, and here's my t-shirt today, to reaffirm my commitment to civility and justice. And I have to advocate that it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire career. Those first two things I mentioned are about introspect, looking inward, and self-growth. Step 3 is about respecting other people and learning their experiences and their perspectives. We as white people have to start listening to understand rather than listening to respond or say what is socially acceptable. We have to ditch catchphrases like "I'm colorblind" and "all lives matter." Jenny said that earlier, and I completely agree with that. If the intent's not there, don't say that. But saying these things is dismissive. Saying that I'm colorblind or all lives matter is dismissive of important parts of others' identities, and by extension, the injustices that they've suffered. White people, we don't need a social movement or a hashtag to reassure us that our lives matter. We live every day in positions of safety and privilege because of our skin color. We don't have to think twice about walking outside, jogging, changing a tire, exercising our Second Amendment right, or driving too fast for fear of being murdered because of our biologically assigned amount of melanin. Instead, we have to listen, learn about, and understand how other people feel and perceive injustice. Last thing, we have to take those 3 things and put them together and act. We have to speak out and call racial injustice how it is: disgusting, heinous, intolerable. We have to honor those who sacrificed their lives by proclaiming their names loudly and saying, "No more." George Floyd, no more. Breonna Taylor, no more. Ahmaud, Eric, Philando, Alton, Freddie, and the list goes on and on and on. No more. We can't be resigned to heed the call when someone dies and it's covered all over network news. We have to be proactive and fight against injustice. We have to identify improprieties in our communities, our legal system, workplaces, schools, and go head on after them. We have to teach each new generation the empirical skills to investigate and confront injustice. We have to petition our elected leaders to put forth policies that give everyone a fair shake. And like I said at the onset, I'm not here to lecture and sit here and say things that I don't do myself. So I'm going to leave you with this. Today, with all of you here, I publicly commit myself to the goals that I lay out. I vow to proactively confront injustice and its sources every single day. And I hope you'll do the same. I hope you'll do the same. Let's stop sharing and hashtagging the movement, and let's be the movement.
Wow. Lefford, wow. There's so much that we can unpack with, everything that you just shared, and everything that you just shared was right on time. Wow, man, you really just blew me away. I think you did have a question in there that I would like to open up to the floor. And your question is, and I think you called out our white people that's on the conference call right now in terms of asking, and I don't want to make sure I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what is it that y'all can do? Is that what you asked? I want to make sure I'm careful and I'm
yeah,
understanding
absolutely. There's a challenge there. We all have to step up.
So,
and what certainly what are other things? Yeah.
So I will open the floor up to, it's just to anybody. Your thoughts on the information that Dr. Lefford just shared on, on white privilege and the definition of white privilege and as well as his suggestions on how to move forward in trying to make sure that you use your privilege as a platform to make change where you respectively can make change. So I'll open. If you can, raise your hands and let us know if you would like to say something and or speak to what Dr. Lefford said. Dude, that was powerful, man. Thank you so much. That was very, very powerful. Chris, people are also asking too in the chat room some of the suggestion that you made. Would that be available, or can they email you and get that information from you as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody wants to chime in and either speak or make a comment or even ask a question about the information that Dr. Lefford just shared with us?
Hi, Taran, it's Michelle. I would like to just thank Chris for that. I think as watching this, I know how I feel, but I certainly can't understand the full expanse of the feelings. And I struggle to respond in a way that is helpful and appropriate. So thank you, Chris, for helping me to understand that and think how I can do that better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'll jump in real quick. I'm an immigrant. And one of the things that fascinated me is that this white privilege was handed to me just because of the color of my skin. There are things that are accessible to me. I'm not even, like I said, I'm not even an American, but I'm somehow a member of a group that I've actually never asked to be a part of, but just because of the color of my skin. And that to me is fascinating, that really is how it works.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that was just what I wanted to add.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I think, Chris Skidmore, do you have your hand up? If so.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate everything that Dr. Ledford, Dr. McZee, and Dakia and everybody has shared. It sounds like living in an ecosystem where this systemic, structural deck stacking has subsisted for centuries and continued with government sanctioned reinforcement of all of these policies that continue to bestow white people like me with more privilege and more safety and a different existential status than other people, that the only way that people like me could ever say that I'm not a racist is to be constantly working, like Dr. Ledford said, to change that system. Because just by doing nothing, we're letting the status quo go, and we are being racist by letting this systemic perpetration of oppression continue. Is there some way we could, from the office, make available a list of organizations that are doing the right work, that are actually looking at ways that other places have changed the system locally and advocating for those resources locally to make systemic change in our communities, or organizations that are training people how to protest and mobilize, and that kind of describe these different organizations and what they're trying to do, whether they're explicitly focused on cultures of police brutality or the wealth imbalance because of the continuation of redlining that we still see today, or just changing the entire system like Black Lives Matter? Is there some way that we could, as individual staff and students and faculty at the college, engage and join these groups that are doing the right work, and to find out what's out there that we can plug into, that we could get kind of resources like that?
Yes. So, Chris, yes, we can provide, organization and Black businesses and reading for you. So just reach out to me offline, or anybody else reach out to me offline, and we can get that information to you. We do have it. I know Erin Howard has some information that she can share as well. So yes, to answer your question, yes, we do, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for those comments, man. Thank you so much. Next, we have Angela Meyer. Angela, if you can come in.
Thank you. So when I think about white privilege, when I think about what I can do, the word that automatically comes to mind for me is choice. That's part of white privilege. We have that choice without having to be in fear or anything. And I have the choice to confront, to make change around me in ripples, and I have the choice not to be fearful of having those confrontational conversations with people that I have that unconditional love for, those family members. And just, sometimes you got to put people in check and have those just tough conversations and discussions, because they might not see it as it is. They were raised that way, and I truly believe that there is that nurture side of racism, things that we can and cannot control. I cannot control systematic racism, but I can control mentality and making that choice to confront those conversations and continue to be a lifelong learner about the systematic racism so that I can improve myself every single time. I'm pregnant, right? I'm 31 pregnant, weeks pregnant, and I have the choice to teach my daughter about systematic racism and making that choice for herself so she does not give in to peer pressure or fear of being rejected, because she ideally will be willing to have those tough conversations and be a strong-minded woman, to not allow that system to, build those walls around her, and make that choice to continue to fight that, because the way history has continued to repeat itself, this will be a continued battle, but every day we make improvement and we take steps forward.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Anyone else wants to share? Yes, Stephen Barry, come on in.
So I'm just thinking about this, and of course I shared that, I'm from Georgia, my folks are from Alabama, I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I want to get to the point that most people, I don't have any data to back this up, are opportunists. And when you're living in the South as a white person, you realize your privilege and you're going to use it because it's an advantage. And personally and selfishly, you don't want to lose that advantage. So I don't know how that drives it subconsciously, but it probably even drives it consciously, that if you can use that tool of privilege to your advantage, most people are going to do it. And just thinking out loud is that it's the systems that we do need to work as people, white people, to do what Chris Ledford was talking about, is work on ourselves. But we also need to work as advocates to change the systems, because the systems are what gives people the incentive, or what provides the privilege. I mean, if you're privileged within a system, you're going to keep exercising that privilege. But if the system does not recognize your privilege, then you need to find the other way to have advantage in the system, which may be, if everyone being equal, is to be a person who celebrates or appreciates equity. But that's just my brainstorm happening out loud. But I just thought I'd share that with everybody.
Thank you, man. That's a great point too. Thank you so much for that information. Next, we have, let me try the name right. Jessica Taylor. Jessica, if you want, please sign
Hello.
in.
I'm here. One of the things that has come up often in the discussion of white privilege, especially among maybe people who lived in poverty, who were white, poor white people, oftentimes they think, well, I can't be privileged because I had a hard life. And the thing that I always try to bring up is, okay, but your life wasn't made harder because of the color of your skin. And that is something that I think a lot of people have a hard time with, because when you feel as though things are against you in the beginning, it's hard to even see that there is more beyond that you might not be seeing. One thing also, and this is sort of unrelated, the thing that I've been sitting back and watching these protests and watching everything go on, of course, on Facebook and everything else, and I'm concerned that if I say something, I'm going to be taking away a voice from somebody who maybe in the past has not had one. I'm afraid that I'll be virtue signaling, or otherwise, taking away from the struggle, or the voice, the I can't think of the right word right now, of somebody who really deserves to have that platform when white people have had a platform for many years. So that's my concern. That's just what I would like to do to work against that. Is, in some way. Sorry, that sounded kind of strange.
No. I mean, I understand exactly what I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of you want to make sure that the information that you're sharing, you're not taking away from anybody that is a part of the marginalized community. You're taking away their voice because you're speaking up. I personally think that you're actually not taking away from a marginalized voice. I think if you can find a way to work with the marginalized community and use your own platform to help the community, then I think you're doing a great job with helping out and being that advocate, being that ally. So I don't want you to think that you are taking away from someone, especially if you have something to say and you're standing up for the right thing. Now, if you're not, then I will hope that you would silence yourself, especially if you're not saying the right thing. And that's another thing. So let's talk about that a little bit, real quick. And again, Jessica, thank you so much for the words. Let's talk about when and I want to make sure I'm very empathetic about this to my white brothers and sisters or my white non-binary people. When you don't say anything, do you feel like that's a problem when you don't say anything? You know it's wrong and you don't say anything. Well, it's not me, it's not my problem. Do you all, or does anyone feel like that's a problem? Or you have people like, for those who are in the sports world, quarterback for the Saints, Drew Brees, has just made a statement about how he disagrees with anybody that kneels during the national anthem. He said that both his grandfathers fought for the country, and he thinks that it's disrespectful. He still doesn't get it. It was never ever about the flag. And I will tell people on this conference call right now, it's not about the flag. It's not. It's about a peaceful protest about our judicial system and how it's not right. And so that's what Colin Kaepernick was kneeling about. It was never, ever about the flag. But let me go back to my original question in terms of do you feel like you don't have a say in this fight? Do you feel like if you're silent, you're not doing anything? I just want to just kind of get people's thoughts. And again, no pressure at all. I want to make sure I'm respectful of everybody's thoughts, and I don't want to pressure anybody to say anything. But at the same time, you know, do you feel as though you could be doing more? So I'll open up the questions to everybody and just kind of, you know, get your thoughts on that, you know, in terms of the questions that I just asked. Anybody feel free to chime in, anybody.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Anna Kenyon. I think that there's more that can be done on both sides. I've listened to a lot of great comments, and I appreciate those who are Caucasian, who are being transparent, who are being open about where, you know, life has brought them from. And I'm a mother of 3 children, 2 being a 30-year-old and a 27-year-old African-American male, and a 19-year-old female. Having to have these conversations like what you were saying, Mr. McZee, from when my children were at an age of understanding, you know, I had to teach them of what to watch out for. As a parent, you know, that's a hard pill to swallow, you know, where you're having to talk to your young kids about the racism that takes place when kids are so innocent about the things that's going on around them. Because you're also looking at whether or not, am I dropping a seed of something that they don't need to know about right now, or do I wait till they experience it and then have that conversation? You know, I've experienced racism myself since, you know, I can remember, on both sides, as a person who've always been the only Black person at a meeting or in the class or in Girl Scouts or wherever it may be. And I find myself even right today being that only person. And one of the things that I'm finding is that it is so important for us, and for me as an African-American person, to ensure I create an environment for those who are Caucasian, who are really wanting to know, how can I help? And really, because sometimes people don't know that they don't know. So when you're talking about that white privilege, they just really don't know that that's what, you know, there's a name for it. But I have had colleagues, I've had friends who were white who have come to me and really want to just know some real intimate things and some things that they can ask without any judgment. And I think that that's a start right there, when each person can have that open and transparent dialogue with another person, with a person of another color, without any judgment, without any defensiveness, you know, or any blame as well, and that they can openly ask those questions. I had an assistant principal who was experiencing some communication issues with her African-American mother, because the teacher could not relate to the child, you know, in her classroom. And so there was just a big clash. But she came to me wanting to be proactive as to how can I allow this, some great results to come out of these meetings. And I told her, I said, one thing you can do is have that meeting with the parent before the meeting, so you can get a perspective of where the mother is actually coming from, instead of waiting until that meeting. And if the situation got hostile or took a turn for, you know, towards south, then you would already be prepared. You already have a understand the perspective where the mom is coming from. But I mean, there's so many instances, and I don't want to continue, you know, to take up more time. But there are so many great comments here, and I think one of the things is that I'm trying to do is have those dialogues before major things happen, you know, and having that opportunity for them to ask anything you want to ask. What is it? I don't care if it's just something that was put in your head that was just too out there about Black people. please feel free to just ask me, and I can try my best to give you a better understanding or better perspective. So, I mean, like I said, there's so much that's going on right now. I'm from a small community, and I just made a phone call to our local police chief, who is very open to hear some things. Nothing is happening in our city as far as protests, but I want to talk to him before things get out of hand, you know, and because of everything that's happening in you know, globally right now. So just wanted to say that thank you all for providing this opportunity, this platform for things to be said.
Have we lost Taran? I'm not seeing him on my side panel here.
Am I back?
Yep. Yeah, I got you.
So my screen went blank. And so I thought I lost the whole thing. Whew. Thank you. Thank you. So one thing that that was just mentioned was, which I think is very, very important, is into assume. I think that's very, very important.
So since Taran is having some technical difficulties, let's go ahead and have Marissa share her thoughts while we wait.
Thank you, Aaron. I think if you guys can hear me, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I was kind of deciding if I wanted to speak or not, because I feel like everybody so far has really shared, and it's been very helpful and wholehearted and even, you know, thought-provoking. I think for me, I'm sharing from more of a personal experience. For those that don't know, I'm African American. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up there, moved to Lexington because I went to the University of Kentucky. And the reason why it was me thinking about sharing was for the past couple of days, it's been difficult. Not because, of course, it's been difficult because of everything that's going on in the world, but I think it's been difficult because it's wearing on African Americans or anyone, or even anybody that is in any kind of position to have to now advocate as well as educate. And the reason why that is hard is because people are coming and saying, like, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And then in times like this, it's like, you want to say, oh, I can, this is what you need to do. But sometimes, like, I don't feel like being the person to have to educate right now. And sometimes it's frustrating because like we just said, please educate yourself and please do these things. But it's also kind of tiresome because people have been doing these things for years. Like, a lot of these things are not just new or things that have been going on. The NAACP has been around for 100 years. There's organizations that have been around trying to fight these kind of injustices. And so when you have people that are like, oh, I didn't know, or I had no idea, it can be exhausting because it feels like, well, you chose not to have any idea, but now I have to now educate. And then that's exhausting on anybody who has been doing it for years. because it can be daunting. And even when I was talking to one of my best friends that works in the school systems, she was like, you hear people say stuff like, well, I haven't seen anything. And it's kind of insulting to people who are like, I've been doing this work my entire life. I've been trying to fight any of these injustices. So I'm just speaking from my personal experience, and even talking to some of my colleagues and stuff. I've heard people say that like they're just exhausted of having to be the person that start the conversation, or have to talk to their friends, or having to talk to people, and that can be tough. So just kind of be mindful of that too, of, you know, you might know a person and you think, oh yeah, how can I help, how can I do this, but it's also can be exhausting. So that was my thoughts.
Wow, thank you. Chris, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I see Aaron Gay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. I appreciate you all having this, Dr. McZee, and bringing in Dr. Ledford as a co-moderator. I think this is extremely important, especially in this day and time. So being a minority and being able to talk about this, I think is a very important thing. And we're very fortunate that we are in higher education, because people are hungry for this information, this knowledge. And so everyone who's here should really be commended for that also. I wanted to circle back to something that was mentioned earlier, especially in regards to white privilege and what individuals should say and could say. And this was something that we discussed in the Cultural Competency Certification Program. There's two words that we use a lot: an ally and an advocate. And allies are very important. An ally is your friend. They are someone you stand beside, you eat with them, you work with them, you are friends, and we all have to be one another's allies. And oftentimes, you know, individuals who are white do have individuals who are people of color, and so it's an ally. But one of the differences is becoming an advocate. And that's where sometimes people pause and kind of stand back and get a little fearful, and it's understandable why. Because when you become an advocate, you're putting yourself out there almost with that minority, whether it's people of color, whether it's LGBTQ individuals, it doesn't matter. You're standing up, and so you're going to get some of the blowback. And we're not advocating or saying that you do this at risk of your safety, but sometimes if these people are your friends and you're standing up for them, you have to put yourself out there also. So it's good to be an ally, but we also have to be advocates. We have to stand up for one another. So this comes into play when family members say certain things at reunions, or, you know, the holidays or whatever. Do we just kind of recede back, or are we an advocate for those individuals that are being spoken about? When a meme is sent around, do we sit and laugh at it, or do we just simply say, oh, I don't want to see that? Or do we actually say something back to that group chat that, you know, is sending this meme around? That's being an advocate. That's standing up. That's saying something. That's putting yourself out there pretty much on the line. And that's one of the things that we can do for one another: be an ally, but we also have to be an advocate in that regard. So as I mentioned at the outset, that's not an easy thing to do. And that sometimes isn't the personality for a lot of people. They would just rather, you know, kind of back away from it. But where we are and what we're seeing, it is kind of time to step up. Again, not putting yourself at risk. That's not what we're looking for here, but sometimes speaking out against it. And we always want to remember too, when something happens, people want to cut ties with people. If we cut ties with people, there's no longer communication there. We can't help them. We can't say things. We can't provide them with information so that they can grow. So simply cutting ties with people when they say or do things that we don't like, that's not benefiting them, and it's not benefiting us. So that's just kind of what I wanted to put forward. And again, thank you all very much for doing this.
Aaron, thank you. Thank you so much for educating us on the difference of an ally and an advocate. So thank you so much for the information. I want to go to Megan White real quick, and then I'm going to go to Shelby.
Yeah, thank you. Just really quick, I wanted to say something kind of inspired by what Marissa said earlier. I don't know how many of you all on this call are instructors that actually go into the classroom, but I would encourage you, and I'm doing this myself, especially those of us who are white, if there's any way at all that you can weave race issues into your course content, I just feel like that's my responsibility as a white woman who's an educator to do that. Like, if I'm not doing that, I feel like I'm not doing my job properly. And I know that it doesn't make sense necessarily for every single discipline, but it can make sense for a lot of subjects. And that's another really good way, like, to go back to what I believe Dr. Ledford was saying earlier, and like someone else mentioned this too, like a lot of white people think that they're not privileged because they're poor. So this is like a great way also to weave intersectionality into these conversations too, like regardless of what discipline you teach. And so, and I don't necessarily think that you should just jump into it and do it if you're not prepared. I know that when I first started teaching, I would have been uncomfortable and ill-equipped to address issues like this in front of a classroom, but I know that it's my responsibility to get to a point where I can do that, and that's what I'm working on. And I think that's what other instructors, especially white instructors, should be doing as well. And like Marissa was saying, it's not the responsibility of people of color to educate white people on what needs to be done. So like that's what we should be doing, I think, for those of us who are instructors.
Wow. Thank you, Megan. That's actually a powerful statement that you just made. And please know that myself, and I'll just throw Chris out there as well, we are readily available if you need us to come and speak in your classrooms. If you need us to come and help you with your curriculum on diversity, inclusion, equity initiatives, that's what we're here for. We're colleagues. So please reach out to either one of us and allow us to help you with that. And I have actually, I speak for myself, because Chris also teaches race and ethnicity and politics class as well. But I've actually helped several faculty members over the years recreate their curriculum to infuse diversity into their curriculum, all the way from physics to biology to math. There's a way that you can do it. It's if you want to do it. Shelby, are you there? I want to bring Shelby in real quick.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I wasn't going to speak as well, but I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Marissa and what Megan just said. I think sometimes people, African-American leaders and administrators, get so tired and exhausted of having these same conversations over and over again. But every time we do have these conversations, I just want to say personally, I do learn something, and I have some kind of takeaway and some kind of nugget that I can carry on to my 23-year-old African-American male. And I say this all the time, wherever I am and with him. When you walk in a room, there's already 2 strikes against you. You are and you are a male. And so I don't know if many of you know that we've started an initiative at Bctc called A Few Good Men, and it's specifically for Black young men. And we are trying to empower them and encourage them and teach them how to be fully equipped when they walk out that door and when they walk in your classroom. And for people who are on this call and these kinds of conferences and meetings, there are typically people who have a heart and care and want to make a change. We holistically as a college reach those who don't, but are responsible for our males of color and female of color in their classrooms or in their offices or in whatever meeting. And so I want to challenge us as a local body to first support our initiatives and the programs that we have at the college and support each other, and also encourage students to participate, because you see them on a daily basis, probably in your classroom. And so for these kinds of initiatives, they need to participate in and be a part of to be fully equipped. And I also want to challenge our institution that we need to be a little bit more diverse in the classroom, teaching our students. So there's some things that we can work on as a local body to prepare our students, but also prepare us as administrators and colleagues.
Thank you, Shelby. And as well as, one thing that, you just said is, at least what I've taken from it, we need to continuously diversify our faculty as an institution. And so I can honestly say we are really, really working towards that. But I'm glad that you did say that, because that's the direction that we are going in. I also want to thank you for sharing about other opportunities, A Few Good Men, also becoming hers for our African American females on campus. And we can get all this information to you all for you all to share with all the students that you may come in contact with. We can get all this information to you as well. I also, real quick, I wanted to shout out, and probably gonna kill me for this, but Aaron Howard also teaches ethnic study classes and can actually also help you diversify your curriculum as well. So Aaron, want to let them know that I've endorsed your work, but also to let everybody know that they can reach out to you as well if they are looking to diversify their curriculum. So we have about 6 minutes left for this, and you know, speaking with Dr. Russian, who is our Vice President for Student Development and Enrollment Management, her and I had a very open, frank conversation yesterday about the discussion today. And I'm willing and open, and Dr. Leffert is willing to open if we need to do a conversation on Race in America Part 2, we can do that as well. I really, really think that this was a rich, rich conversation today. Everyone that involved themselves in this conversation, thank you so much. But one thing I want to do real quick, if we have any students on this call, and I don't know if I've heard from a student, but I would love to know at this point in time how our students are feeling about what's actually going on, or how our students are feeling about what you've heard in this conversation today. So please, 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 if there's a student on here, a brave soul on here, please, could you share a little bit with us and speak up and let us know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how do you think this conference call went? So any students? I need one brave soul. Okay, I'm not going to push or make anyone say anything, but students, we're here for you. We're here about you, and you all will be taking strides forward, moving forward for us in this good fight that we're fighting. So, I want to take the last 4 minutes and just kind of get an understanding on where everybody at is now. How's everybody coping with what we are experiencing right now in our society? So I just want to get some thoughts on that just real quick before we close. Anybody want to share how they are coping with what's going on right now? What are you doing to ease your mind? What are you doing to make sure that you're not putting yourself or emotionally tying yourself up to a point where it's starting to bother you physically? Is anybody doing anything at this point in time to cope with what's going on? I would share, but I would rather hear from you all. So, anybody want to share? Okay, Malik. Souls. Unmute yourself, sir.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I was a former student at Bctc, so I can better answer this question. I'm 21 years old, so seeing all this now kind of hurts because we have been through a lot. And, my mom, she tells me all about this all the time, about these situations we're going through. And she warns me about, when I go out with my friends and stuff. and I can see the pain in her, like off this George Floyd thing. It kind of hurts me to see her like that. So I just want us to one day, I hope we get to fix all this, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how to really explain myself when it comes to this, but it kind of hurts in a way. And I don't want my little brothers to go through that, you know, that type of thing. So that's my opinion on it, at least.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing, man. I mean,
No problem.
that's powerful and helping us to understand where you at and how you feeling. But not only that, man, you're put in a position now where you have to teach your younger siblings on how
Right.
to act and how to react to what's actually going on in society. But not only that, man, you have to make sure you are carrying yourself in a certain manner so you don't put yourself in harm's way. So, you know, whatever you're doing, man, just make sure you carry yourself with respect and dignity. And don't forget, at the end of the day, you are still a human being, but you also are still a Black man. So don't
Yes,
ever
sir.
forget that. All right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Malik.
No problem.
Anybody else? How are you all coping with this? Kawhi? Go ahead, Kawhi.
Hello, everyone. I've been sitting back and listening. I really have been struggling on whether I would speak up and say something because it has been a very emotionally draining situation where I feel like I'm talking a lot, and I really can't share how I'm coping with it because I feel like I haven't mastered that yet. I still have some anger. I still have some pain. I still have some hurt that's going on that I'm trying to work through so that I can best help my students who are feeling the same way. So I appreciate everyone who has been on here speaking and talking about everything, but I will like to encourage everyone to keep this up, even when the media dies down and it's not being talked about as much because the next thing has popped up. I still encourage everyone to keep the movement alive, keep talking about it, keep advocating for the rights of those the rights of all people, pretty much. Okay, so I think we've been here before, we've talked about this before. This has been going on for years, longer than I've even been alive, and I think we have to keep hope alive, but we also have to keep the movement alive, even when the media is no longer there.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Kawhi. Thank you for, again, you said you struggled throughout the whole conversation, even if, to say if you wanted to say anything. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and as well as giving us that wisdom and that encouragement to move forward. Dr. Leffer, I want to close this out. I don't know if you have any parting words. I do have a quote that I want to leave by Carter G. Woodson, but I wanted to give you the platform real quick if you had any parting words for everybody that's listening.
Yeah, can you still hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, something that's really kind of been a theme of the past several comments and stuff that you've touched on, with how we're coping with things or dealing with things. I just want everybody, hopefully, to be respectful, and I'm in particular talking, people being respectful, those people who have good intentions, and many of the folks here, myself included, who want to do things to help. As we've heard, this stuff's been going on for a long time, and things are bad right now, and people of color are exhausted. They shouldn't have to be talking about this in 2020, and the list goes on. And sometimes it's okay to, not want to talk about things, and us white folks have to be mindful of that. And I wouldn't say something without giving a reference or my own example. I mentioned to you that I have a lot of African American brothers, of people that I care a lot about and who care a lot about me. And I think you can tell what my substantive interests are, my passion is, and sometimes I'm guilty of using those folks or reaching out to those folks to get their ideas about things, and they don't want to talk about it sometimes. Just a couple of days ago, my best friend had to remind me. He said, I was friends with Chris Ledford before I was friends with Dr. Ledford. We don't have to talk about. I don't want to talk about this right now. And we as white folks, we have to understand that that's okay. We can do other things, and that's been something that's very beneficial about this conversation. There are other things we can do. We can contact organizations. We can be civic-minded people and vote accordingly and be active. But if folks don't want to have conversations with us, as good as our intentions are, that's okay.
Thanks, man. Thank you for that. Thank you again for being here with us today. Thank you again for being here to educate us. You did a great job, man. And I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I want to leave everybody with this. Carter G. Woodson, who wrote the book, Miseducation of a Negro, which is an actual great book that still applies today in 2020. He said that we do not show the Negro how to overcome segregation, but we teach him how to accept it as a final and just. Again, we do not show the Negro how to overcome segregation, but we teach him how to accept it as final and just. We have the opportunity, we have the power to change that narrative. We really, really do. Hopefully, this conversation today has enlightened a lot of people. I'm glad to hear all of the perspective and great minds that actually work at Bctc, as well as the great minds that are not affiliated with Bctc that shared today. Thank you all so much for taking the last hour and a half to speak with us about race in America. Again, Dr. Ledford and I would love to do Race in America Part 2, if everybody would love for us to do so. Dr. Ledford is the Director of Institutional Effectiveness here at Bctc. And also, I am the Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Bctc. If you need to get in contact with us, you can just look us up on the website. I would encourage you, Dr. Ledford, you can show the t-shirt one more time. The Bctc Cultural Competency Certification Program led by Maria Torres. That's a great program for you to learn cultural competency just overall and civility overall. I've heard nothing but awesome things. I haven't had the opportunity to experience it yet. It is on my radar. But I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about that program. So if you are affiliated with Bctc, please look that up. Please look Maria Torres up and ask the questions about the program. Again, thank you all so much for being a part of this with us today. I appreciate it. Please be safe and make sure that if you are going to go out and protest, make sure you are doing the right things and make sure that you are being safe and the people around you are being safe. Okay? Thank you all. Dr. Ledford, you the man. I appreciate you. To Vanessa and Elizabeth, thank you for interpreting for us today, but as well as someone that's behind the scenes, Aaron Howard, for conducting all of the behind the scene work for this today. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And hopefully I will be able to see you all soon on campus. All right. Peace.